In this session, we are going to talk about the charts which actually make use of multiple axes. So some of the charts that fall into this category, the scatter plot, the dual axis charts, and an extension of the dual axis charts, which is the combination chart, wherein I'm using more than one axis to compare the different measures. So I'm using two axes to compare different measures, and some important aspects relating to understanding the correlation between the two measures, or in some cases I want to understand the same measure probably at a high level as well as a breakdown level. So I want to look at the total sales, and along with that the distribution of the sales region wise. So all these things will lead me to the usage of the multiple axes. So we'll take a few examples to understand all these things. So initially let's get started with a scatter plot. So primarily this is used to understand the relationship between the two measures. So it is basically between two measures, right? No dimension involved here. So we are trying to find out the correlation between the two measures. So one advantage, it looks at the relationship. If one is high, what is happening to the other? I want to look at it, let's say, between sales and profit. I want to see if the sales are high, is it that the profits are also higher, or high sales, low profits? So it can really help me trying to understand the kind of relationship that exists. Along with it helps me in terms of identifying the outliers. So those particular data points which are not behaving in the same way as the rest. When most of the values, let's say, are following high sales, high profit kind of stuff, it might so be possible that one or two products might be falling under the high sales, less profit kind of categories as well. Let's look at that. Again, we are using the same copy chain example, right, wherein I may be interested. I go to the data source, I use the copy chain query. Okay, so these are our various values that are there. Now, okay, let's look at the profit. So let me drag the profit here. Profit onto the rows, so it's showing me the entire profit. Sales, I'm taking it into the columns. So there is one mark, so showing that this is the sales, this is the profit. But I'm not interested in one single, right? I want to break it down by various dimensions. So that's where I start adding things to the marks. Probably I want market wise. So I'll drag the market. What is that I can do? The market probably I want to drag into the color. Okay, now the whole breakup came market wise. So I could clearly see that, right, for this particular market, which is the West, the sales are higher, profits are also higher. Here the sales are moderate, profits are moderate. Here the sales are lesser and profits are also lesser. But again, if I wanted even more detail, right, let's say I am more interested in looking at one we have dragged, which is the market. Let's say I also want to drag the product, right? I really want to drag even the product, let's say, into the label. So now I'm getting different markets, different products, a kind of a line like this, right? For different markets, different products, I'm seeing where the typical sales are and where the profits are. I can really, even if required, let's say I want to find out, okay, here the sales is to the extent of 200K, 2 million here, profit of around 472,000 for decaf espresso. So I could clearly see the relationship between the sales and profits, and I can simply drag the stuff if I really want to find out, right, uh, a different sizing altogether, right? Let's say the number of records, I want to use it as a size, so which could clearly talk about some places where the records are much higher, which is showing a much bigger size, whereas here the records are much lower, which is an indication that the number of customers who have purchased these products are much lesser. So you could really play around doing a representation, and sometimes it might so happen that those which are here in this region, they may talk about the ones where the sales are much higher but the profits are much lower, right? This region shows that the sales are much higher, profits are also higher. This region shows sales are lesser but high profitable kind of products. So you could really bring out useful meanings out of the stuff. But of course, in many examples out here, we are seeing that there is not much of a difference if I am looking at product wise, right? Now, instead of product, let's say I want to look at product type, right? I want to look at product type. Okay, even then it looks more or less on the similar lines itself. And let's say I don't want to look at the market. Now overall it is looking like this is what is happening with the product, sales and profits. So product also, if I drag into the layer of details, so this is working out in this way. Still everything is lined up in the same manner. But in some products it could very well come out that things are here or things are here, where we get a very clear cut demarcation in terms of high sales but low profits, low sales, high profits, high sales, high profit, low sales, low profit. So here I could clearly see espresso is that kind of a product which is having very less sales, and even the profits are also much lesser. So we can really bring out that kind of comparison using a scatter plot. So that's how I can use the scatter plot, right, which can really help me in making this kind of comparisons between the values. And here the size of the circle, I can very well differentiate based on the size, number of records, or even I could have used number of distinct records, right? If I say I am not interested in the number of records, let's say I'm more interested in counting. Even the count is giving me more or less on the similar lines, because we are talking about the number of records altogether. Alright, now we can next talk about the other kind of chart which helps us in understanding the multiple axis. We have a dual axis chart. So when we talked about the scatter plot, we were using x-axis and y-axis. But here we will talk about two y-axis only, right? So see, in some cases, especially in case of stacked bar chart, if you remember, we have used measure names and measure values, which were telling us how do I put more than one measure on a single axis. But here we will be talking about using the same axis, y-axis, one opposite to the other. If one y-axis is here, the other y-axis is here. This is what is coming as a dual axis, right? So we are using the two axes opposite to each other with a common flat plane. So that is what we are trying to drive using this dual axis kind of example. So let's try driving it. So this time what I'll do is the sales and the profit, I don't drag them into x-axis or something. Both the sales and the profit, both of them I drag into the rows only. First I have the sales, then I have the profit. Two measures. Still I am talking about two measures, one beside the other. And now the default graph comes more like this. First the graph will be shown for the sales, then it would be shown for the profits. That is the kind of a default. Now let's say I want to look at this probably month-wise. Month-wise sales and profits. So what is that I should do? I will typically pull in the date. Right? I will pull in the date from here to here. By default it is showing the year, but I can very well right click on it and I look at the month. Okay, month wise sales, month wise profits. So these are the numbers that are being shown, one below the other, something like this. But this is where I have to look at creating a dual axis chart. Otherwise the default chart for two different measures comes more like this. This is not a default axis kind of a chart. So I need to have a dual axis chart created. Now if I have to do that, first thing, after I have created something like this, I will use the drop down menu of one of them. So whichever the one I want on the dual axis, I'll use the drop down menu of one of them and I'll select this dual axis. So suddenly now what you see is a separate y-axis got created here with a different scale. Here the scale is different, here the scale is different, and probably now I am seeing that both of them are overlapping on each other, which is creating a kind of a meaning that the sales and profits are more or less the same, which may not be a reality. So this is where I can even do the synchronization. This is purely because the scales are different, right? So we could clearly see if I don't do anything, it is very misleading. It is telling me that the sales and profits are roughly equal in value at almost all the places, which may not be a reality. So that is where I'll try to click on this profits axis and I say synchronize the axis so that the scales are very much appropriate. Both the sides, the scales are represented appropriately and a true picture is being presented to me on the single screen itself. I get different kinds of sales month-wise and the profits month-wise across the overall data. And of course I can very well, now you see here I'm getting measure names, right? So a few important points, if you look at the sales and the profit, they are sharing the same x-axis, but sales is on this y-axis, profit is on this y-axis. And now when you look at the marks, here you are seeing all, sales, profit. For all three of them, you can have a different set of marks altogether. Right? You can use different set of marks. That is what is the flexibility that is given by Tableau. So I can have a separate marks for all, or I can have separately for sales, separately for profit. That is the advantage that we are going to get using a dual. So which means, let's say for all, instead of automatic line, I want to change them into bar. Yes, now both are becoming bars. Instead of both showing lines, they are becoming bars. Now again I can convert them into line. But more than that, I can try for separate. So what I could clearly see, let's say I want to keep the sales, I don't want it as a line, I want to keep it as a bar, but profits I want to keep it as a line. This becomes a combination chart. I'm creating two different kinds of charts on one single, and it becomes very flexible because the dual axis chart will actually give us the flexibility to change the automated type of charts, which from automated you can change to the chart of your liking, which can really give much more flexibility to the chart. So you can drag different things into the colors, you can drag different right, all that kind of manipulations you can very well do. So this goes more like a dual axis chart. Now one more combination or one more important chart that comes in this category, combination. Of course, the one that I have shown towards the last is actually a combination chart. But in some cases, the combination chart can be extended in such a way that even without the dual axis, even with a single axis, I can very well create a combination chart. So that's the reason I really wanted to stress on this combination chart. Let's say I'm taking the sales, again I'm taking the sales. So I'm taking the sales two times. Right, on one of them I want to look at the big picture, and on the other one I want to break it, let's say product wise or region wise. So combination charts are basically an extension of the dual axis charts, wherein I can very well play around with the marks because there is a flexibility of the marks which I can do for all or each of them separately. So the marks is giving an option to edit for each individual axis. That is what we are calling as a combination. Right? So what I can very well do, okay, the first one I can keep it as a bar, whereas the second one, instead of bar, I'll change it into a line to start with. Now I'll take, let's say, month wise. So the date I'm dragging it here. So instead of year, let's say I take month wise. Right? When I'm taking it month wise, obviously the first one, the sales, it should not be an automatic line. I'll make it as a bar. So the sales is becoming a bar. The next sales is becoming a line. This is the default thing that is coming out. Now I can very well take the help of this onto the dual axis, right? Well, because it's the same quantity, or I don't want it in this kind of a presentation, so I'll take this onto the dual axis. So the second one, I'll simply take it onto the dual axis, and when I've taken it, obviously both are actually the same, so I can really hide this heading. So it looks as if it's a single axis. Though it's plotted on the dual axis, it looks as if it's a single axis. But much more than that, let's say now here, instead of keeping it as it is, I will drag the market, let's say, onto the color. Which means now I'll have a market wise analysis. Right? I'll have a market wise analysis across the sales. So on the left hand side, it's the total sales. Whereas, okay, now let me keep even the axis, right? So that we can understand the process. So I'll click on this. I'll say show header. So I go to this. So first let me see the heading. So I'll say show header. Now the axes are showing different values, but I want to synchronize that stuff. So I say right click, I say synchronize axis. Yes, this makes things more and more better. And once I have synchronized it, then I'll remove the header. So now it gives me a clear picture that these lines are being shown, which is the total sales, whereas each individual line is showing a market wise sale. This was possible by using a secondary axis itself, by using a dual axis itself, but we are not showing the dual axis. So that's a way we, even though it's the same field, by taking it on two different axes, we can give a much better kind of a representation of the same. So we are creating a view with the different mark types, even if we are not displaying the usual dual axis. So this kind of a combination where we are using bars for the total and lines for the breakup over time, it's a very effective mechanism where we are giving more and more better context to the overall set of explanation. Now, what you could clearly see here, the color, which is the market wise. I have given only into the second one. In the first one, there was no color. So that's the reason for each of them, the color is different. So different fields are used for color, right? If you look at in the all, it is showing that the color is multiple fields. The reason being, in the first one there was nothing color, whereas in the second one color was based on the market. So because of that, in the all it is showing multiple fields as the color. And this kind of chart really helps us to really make out that I can mix the detailed breakup and the total in the same view, because the bars are typically at the highest level, whereas the lines are market level. I am using the same field on both the axes, and I am having a different level of formatting for both of them. I have removed the header here so that I really don't require, because at the end it's the same field. And we have the different representations of the month and all that stuff. Again, if you want just to showcase this, I can very well click on the month out here. The formatting, let's say if these names are much bigger, I can very well click on this. I can select on the formatting options, which is this, and this formatting option by default. So by default, these are the formatting options. So the dates automatic is the full. Either I can do an abbreviation of them, or I can do a first letter of them. Let's say I put an abbreviation for all of them. I get them slightly simpler, which can help me in displaying the graph slightly much better. So the combination chart is much helpful in terms of giving a wide range of opportunities for mixing the different types of charts at different types of levels itself, different levels itself. So that's how all these usage of multiple axes really helps in providing more and more details to our charts and visualization of the data. All right. So thanks a lot for listening to this session. Thank you very much.